Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming to the dinner. I want to especially thank Rob and Ellen Sutphin tonight for their hospitality, for their work in inviting all of us into this space. I'm deeply grateful for their gifts. I'm grateful for their presence. I'm deeply grateful that they have expressed such an interest in 1128 here as we've gotten to know each other. So thank you, Rob and Ellen. I appreciate you hosting our dinner tonight. As part of the dinner tonight, I wanted to make sure to introduce you to this idea of covenant groups. This is such a critical part of the work that 1128 does with women in ministry. And to do that, I have invited a familiar face to all of you, and that is Leigh Sharp, who is your involvement minister there at the Bamble Church of Christ. Leigh is here tonight, as well as Cynthia Ownby, who is her covenant group leader, her women's group leader. So I'm going to actually turn it over to the two of them and let them introduce you to the idea of covenant groups, the power of covenant groups, and why it's so important for us to continue investing in the care and in the growth and the empowerment and allowing women to have the voice that God has given them. So, Leigh.
Thanks, Trey. I am so excited that you are all here. I love covenant groups. I've been involved in one for probably 3 or 4 years. Cynthia, I actually knew Cynthia several years before that, but really didn't get to know her deeper until we were in a group together. And I'd kind of like to ask Cynthia if she might describe a little bit about what covenant groups are and kind of the purpose behind it, and then we can talk about our experience a little bit.
Yeah. Again, I want to echo, I'm so glad everyone's here and that you're interested in learning about 1128 and covenant groups, because it's been such a big part of my life. So covenant groups have been in Houston coming up on 10 years. I've been involved since the beginning, first as a member, and then a few years ago, I started leading groups. Our covenant groups are made up of 4 to 6 women. We meet together once a month for a full day. In that time together, we spend time in spiritual formation practices. So we pray, we focus on scriptures, we find different ways of interacting and listening to God. We always have some sort of teaching that we practice together. So some years that's a book, some years that's learning about different things. And discussion comes along with that. And then another huge part of our days is just sharing what's going on with our souls. Where do we see God at work in our lives? Where do we see God calling us? What are the questions that we have? And what are the ways that we can support and honor and listen to one another in those spaces? As women in ministry, it's such an important space to have this really safe area where we can come and bring what's happening, and trust that the people in the room with us not only are going to honor that space and love us where we are in that space, but also support us as they walk alongside us and encourage us to where they're seeing God and the ways that God's at work that maybe we're missing. So it's such a gift to have that space together and to have the safety to grow in our own spiritual lives together.
The first time I got introduced to covenant groups, I had not heard of them before. I had no idea what they were. And I don't know if you remember this, Cynthia, we were at the ACU breakfast, the minister's breakfast that they have every year. And I didn't know very many people because I didn't go to ACU. I actually didn't go to a Bible college. So I know who people are, but I don't have a lot of relationships from my college days or anything like that. And so I'm kind of just looking around, observing, and suddenly I see this really fast movement coming towards me. And it was Ann Bayless. And she had made a beeline for me from across the room. And she runs up to me and she grabs my hand. And if you know me, I'm not a super touchy-feely person. So this was really, really kind of a shock. But she reaches out and she grabs my hand. I have no idea who she is. And she drags me across the room to this. She said, "You have to join our group." That was that was the only thing she said to me. "You have to join our group." And she took me over to this group of people. And so Cynthia, you were there. Meredith was there. Carrie Hill was there, Kelly Edmiston, and so several other different people. And it was just this immediate, you need to be a part of this. And I think that's one of the things, although I love that story and I love the way that I was introduced to them, what I have seen is that same spirit echoed throughout every time someone is, quote, recruited. But there is this idea that we want you to be in our group, not just for us because we want you to be included, but because we know that you need this kind of support. Because there's something, being in ministry is hard. And for any of you that are in ministry, you know, being in ministry it has unique challenges. It is not like other jobs. And if you haven't been in it, you don't always know, you don't always understand. But being a woman in ministry in a traditionally held male role has its own unique challenges. There's a whole other layer of complex factors that play into it. And sometimes, I mean, it's anything from outside things that happen day to day, or our own internal things that hold us back because of the way that we were brought up in these churches and these environments, and the messages that we internalize throughout the way. So what I love about covenant groups is that it provides this space to be with other women who are in ministry. And the very direct short answer is it helps you realize you're not crazy. Sometimes you just need somebody to validate the things that you are experiencing and go, you are not crazy. Yes, it is okay to feel like this is not okay. And it's okay to be bothered by these things that bother God also. And that's holy, and that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. But that we are all here working together to talk about that, to fix that, because we want the church to look more like what God intended it to be. And so anyway, I don't know what you think about all of that. What I was thinking, I know someone had asked recently, like, how is this different from just a Bible study group or a women's small group? And I think for me, it's that it creates a safe space, because the unfortunate reality, and this is true for elders too, for if anyone in the room is elders or ministers, the reality is that Bible study groups and small groups that are church initiated are not always safe spaces for ministers and for elders. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them. They serve a purpose, they have an intentional purpose. But if you are there as part of the leadership of the church, it is not always a safe space for you to talk about the challenges of ministry or your own personal spiritual struggles. And so what I think this group specifically is designed for is to be a safe space to talk about some of the challenges that you can't talk about with other people who either haven't been there or don't understand that there's just these kind of things. Has that been your experience too?
That absolutely has been my experience. And I also think beyond that, when you are in ministry, it's great to show up to a Bible study, but if you're on staff, some extent of you is always working.
Yeah.
There's guards you can't put down. There's things that have to be taken care of. If something comes up, you're the one responsible, whether it's your event or not. And so to have a place where you get to spend time in spiritual formation, spend time in prayer, spend time meeting God there, if I'm being honest, there are some months in the last decade that may be the only time that week that I have that time. That's just the way it works out. And that space that's created just for that is so precious, as well as what I've learned in that space and how it's taught and informed my own spiritual life. And in finding ways to engage with God authentically, that's been such a gift. The other thing I'll say is, we meet together once a month. It's wonderful. There's also everything in between, and knowing, Leanne and I have been on text threads together for years now, and knowing when you've had a rough day or something's happened or there's been a conflict, being able to text and just say, I need prayers, or I don't know what to do here. What do I even say? Like, do I need to say anything? Having that support is such a gift. And we still all the time, we'll get messages from people who we haven't had in our group because they moved away 4 years ago, and they still text because there's this bond that's created for life, honestly. When you find people who have been there and get it, because the fact is there's just not a lot of people who get it, just like Leanne said. And so when you find those people, it's such a gift.
Yeah, for sure. I think also what I have, and this is probably not a lot of people's experience. I don't know. I can only speak from my story and my experience. And because I know that this is being shown to BAML people. I yes, there are challenges everywhere to being a woman in ministry, and at the same time, one of the things I have loved about being in a covenant group is not only to have support when those things are hard or when those things come up, but the majority of my experience, especially in the past couple of years, has been being able to encourage other people, because it is not where I am at right now is not like it is at many other churches. I have felt so affirmed and so supported. And I think it's important for me to be in that group to be able to say to other people, just because it's going this way at your church doesn't mean you need to leave ministry, because there are places that these things are happening. There are places where you can be encouraged and you can be affirmed and you can use your gifts. They're out there. And I feel like I'm in one of those places. And so I've seen that happen time and time again with just people in different places. You've got people in really difficult circumstances at difficult churches, who are trying, they're plodding ahead, they're trying to take steps forward. And then you've got people who are kind of on the opposite side that are able to encourage and go, maybe you're supposed to stay there and maybe you're not. And either way, there are paths that you can take. And then how can we support you to do that? And so I love that exchange of experiences. I think is so valuable. It's not a gossip group, it's not, and women's groups sometimes can become that. Any people group can become that, but it's so much a support for wherever you are, and to have people that will encourage you along the way and literally be there for you, is huge. It's just huge.